Just quickly, I'm Kate Faehrmann. I'm a Greens member of the New South Wales State Parliament in Australia. I'm the party's drug law reform and harm reduction spokesperson, and this is actually my second HRI conference, my first being Porto in Portugal, and a little bit about why I'm here and why I'm so passionate about harm reduction. And I'm the chair of this session, so I won't be long. But just before that conference in Portugal in 2019, in an effort to destigmatise drug use, I wrote an opinion piece in a major daily newspaper in which I came out about my own drug use as a politician at the time, and not drug use in my misguided youth, something I did, back in my university days, but something that I did and enjoyed in my 20s, in my 30s, in my 40s, and that I knew doctors and lawyers, and I was in my 40s at the time I wrote that. Doctors and lawyers and journalists and firefighters and tradespeople and yes, even politicians, I knew who did the same. It started a national conversation, and at press conferences around the country that week, leading politicians were asked if they'd ever taken drugs. Most of them had, but of course in their university days, and of course they deeply regretted it or they didn't like it or something like that. Then last year, after a spate of killings attributed to gangs fighting over the lucrative cocaine black market in Sydney, which is very, very, very lucrative, I wrote another piece floating the idea of regulating cocaine. That got quite a bit of attention. Of course, the major party politicians dismissed the idea outright, but the important thing about it was that quite a few people didn't. And quite a few leading commentators didn't, and it started another national conversation, which of course was the whole point. And I came to this conference this year, when I heard it was in Colombia, because I believe we need a global network of parliamentarians, not former parliamentarians, not former presidents, although that's super important, but politicians who are actually in parliaments now. We need a global network of politicians who are committed to ending the war on drugs. I've come to Colombia, I've already spoken to a number of really exciting politicians, so hopefully this will be the start of something amazing. Okay, so to our first speaker, after all that. Our first speaker is Marcos Roche Miranda. Since 2018, Marcos has been one of the leaders of Recinto para la Calle, a student-led harm reduction collective from Puerto Rico. He is passionate about educating others and exploring the impact of the social determinants of health. Please welcome Marcos.
Hola, hoy la presentación que les tengo, por si acaso, si la quieren ver en inglés, pueden accesarlo a través de la aplicación. Hoy les tengo un salón de clases fuera del salón de clases, las aportaciones y las contribuciones de Recinto para Calle para los profesionales de salud en Puerto Rico. Vamos a hablar de los Estados Unidos de América. Ahora mismo, un 13% de las familias en Estados Unidos están bajo el umbral de pobreza. Cuando hablamos de sin hogarismo, un 36% de las personas sin hogar están sin albergue. ¿Qué significa esto? Son personas sin hogar que están durmiendo en la calle, que están durmiendo debajo de un tren o están en un carro, en sitios donde no se supone que las personas duerman. Sobre el uso de sustancias, un 18% de los adultos tienen trastorno por uso de sustancias en Estados Unidos. Es importante que la escuela de medicina, por ejemplo, enfrenten estos determinantes que acabamos de ver, porque estos son los espacios donde se están educando los futuros médicos y los futuros profesionales de la salud que tendrán impacto en la política pública y en la percepción sobre estos determinantes. Vamos a fijarnos en estos números porque luego los vamos a comparar. Para esta plantilla buscamos 19 páginas de internet de diferentes grupos que hacen alcance comunitario, que hacen medicina callejera en Estados Unidos, liderados por estudiantes, y hay tremendos programas por ahí, con mucho impacto, pero quiero resaltar específicamente Tulane Street Medicine de Nueva Orleans, Tampa Bay Street Medicine de Florida y la Street Medicine de la Universidad de Pittsburgh, porque explícitamente mencionan reducción de daño en sus páginas de internet. Que no mencionen reducción de daño no significa que no practican la reducción de daño, pero es importante porque ahora nosotros sabemos lo injustas y lo paternalista que pueden ser algunas prácticas de la medicina, así que hay que mencionarlo si lo hacemos. Vamos a hablar de Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico es un archipiélago en el Caribe que desde el 1493 es colonia. Primero, gracias a España, y luego, desde el 1898, gracias a Estados Unidos. Aunque ellos prefieren el término territorio no incorporado. En Puerto Rico, un 40% de la población está bajo los niveles de pobreza. Esto es el doble de Luisiana, que es el estado más pobre de Estados Unidos, y es más del triple de la tasa de pobreza de Estados Unidos. Hablamos de sinhogarismo. California es el estado con más personas no albergadas y tiene un 66% de sus personas sin hogar. Nosotros tenemos un 75%. 75% de nuestras personas sin hogar no tienen a dónde ir y duermen en la calle. Esto puede ser una discusión de tal vez los protocolos de los albergues que no son compatibles con la población o que no están llegando los recursos que deberían llegar a Puerto Rico. Adiós. Espérate. Sobre uso de sustancias, que es la razón principal que las personas refieren para estar sin hogar en Puerto Rico, un 33%. 12% de nuestros adultos tienen un trastorno por uso de sustancias. Pero eso fue en el 2016, recogido por el Instituto de Investigación en Ciencias del Comportamiento de Puerto Rico, con datos del 2014 al 2016. Luego en el 2019 sale este estudio de Canino y sus colegas que nos comparan la población puertorriqueña en la isla con la población en general de Estados Unidos. Y encuentra que los puertorriqueños tenemos una tasa más alta de un trastorno por uso de sustancias que la población general de Estados Unidos. Curioso, comparan los puertorriqueños en Puerto Rico, en nuestro archipiélago, con los puertorriqueños viviendo en Estados Unidos, y aún así los puertorriqueños en la isla tienen un uso más alto. Es clave que el último dato de esto se recogió en el 2016. Eso es antes del huracán María, antes de los terremotos del sur y antes de una lista que no acaba de crisis socioeconómica y política en Puerto Rico. Así que, ¿qué está haciendo la institución pública de salud más importante de Puerto Rico? Los estudiantes de la Universidad de Puerto Rico, el Recinto de Ciencias Médicas, desarrollaron una iniciativa basada en la educación, el servicio y la práctica interprofesional. Estos estudiantes, nosotros somos un grupo de estudiantes que lideran esta iniciativa de reducción de daño que conecta con personas sin hogar, con personas que usan sustancias, alrededor del centro médico del país en San Juan. Desde el 2011 esto está ocurriendo. La misión es atender las necesidades inmediatas de las personas que están sin hogar, personas que usan sustancias, enlazarlo a servicios sociales y médicos. Además, educar en las intersecciones de los determinantes sociales de la salud, como la raza, la composición familiar y la estabilidad económica. Y fomentar el aprendizaje por pares a través del servicio y la reflexión. Es importante para nosotros. ¿Qué queremos ver? Nosotros queremos crear una red de apoyo dentro del sistema de salud y la comunidad en general de Puerto Rico para que se empoderen a acercarse con empatía, solidaridad y conocimiento a las experiencias de las personas que servimos. En términos de servicio, nosotros cada 2 lunes vamos un líder y 8 voluntarios a diferentes espacios en San Juan donde dormitan nuestros compañeros. Les decimos compas, que viene de compañeros, porque ese es el tipo de relación que queremos establecer. No necesariamente paciente ni participante. Eso no funciona así. Y impactamos alrededor de 12 personas cada noche, que es un total de 360 impactos al año. Además de eso, de seguro todo el mundo se lleva algo de comer, algo de beber, un kit de higiene, tiene jabón, champú, algo para lavarse la boca, y si alguien tiene heridas o úlceras, nosotros podemos limpiarle la herida y proveerle un kit para que se la limpie. Eso es desde el 2011. En el 2018, nosotros conocimos a Oasis de Esperanza, que es otra organización de reducción de daños basada en Santurce, Puerto Rico, y nos apoyó consiguiendo condones para poder expandir la gama de servicios de reducción de daño que podíamos ofrecer. Y tengo que decir que gracias a la directora de Oasis de Esperanza, Magda Rodríguez Mandri, nosotros estamos aquí hoy. Ella nos enlazó a la red de reducción de daños de Puerto Rico y le agradecemos un montón. Ella está aquí en la conferencia, la pueden ver después. Desde el 2023 conectamos con AMSCA, que es una agencia pública en Puerto Rico, que nos dio acceso a Narcan y nos dio acceso a tiras para probar si las personas tenían fentanilo en sus sustancias, además de unas navegadoras de alcance que nos dejaron enlazar a servicios sociales y servicios médicos por fin. En el 2024 pudimos expandir los servicios médicos que podíamos ofrecer gracias al enlace con la Clínica Juárez, que también proveían transporte, ida y vuelta a la clínica a nuestros compas. También conseguimos medicamentos OTC que podemos brindar. En términos de la educación, nosotros tenemos varias facetas en la educación. En términos de los voluntarios, nosotros recibimos 240 voluntarios al año, que son de una variedad de disciplinas. Y nosotros tenemos un modelo de aprendizaje por pares, que viene de 2 sitios también, pares siendo de que nosotros somos estudiantes enseñándole a otros estudiantes con las experiencias que tenemos en el servicio. Y esto se da a través del proceso de reflexión que viene antes y después del trabajo que hacemos. No es que llegamos, damos el servicio y nos vamos. Hay que digerir la experiencia y entender qué estamos haciendo, cuáles son los determinantes que inciden en el trabajo que estoy haciendo. Y vamos bien profundo en eso de que hay que hacer un cambio sistémico a nivel de sistema. Y vamos bien profundo en la esperanza de que como somos profesionales de salud en crecimiento, eventualmente vamos a poder tomar las decisiones basadas en conciencia y en solidaridad, gracias a Recinto para Calle. Por parte de nuestros compas, nosotros creamos unos espacios donde nos pueden enseñar historias que jamás hubiéramos conocido si no hubiera sido por cómo conectamos esa noche. Se da un proceso bidireccional de conocimiento porque nosotros que estamos desarrollándonos en el área de salud podemos apoyar a nuestros compas hablando sobre sus condiciones médicas, cómo manejarlas, promover visitas al cuidado primario, pero igual a nosotros nos brindan ideas de cómo ante esta limitación severa de recursos, yo como quiera, yo estoy vivo y me manejo. Y eso está brutal y nosotros estamos bien afortunados de tener esta experiencia. Además de eso, tenemos educación al público general. Tenemos un Instagram donde publicamos sobre nuestro trabajo, nuestras metas, nuestros logros. Y recientemente hicimos una colaboración con Ciencia para Todos, que una de sus fundadoras está aquí, Emily Rodríguez, que habla sobre esa Ciencia para Todos. Es una iniciativa basada en comunicación científica, trae un lente interseccional. Y este video lo hicimos de reducción de daño. Llegamos a 60,000 views, eso está bien cool. Tenemos también, los periódicos locales han publicado historias sobre nosotros. Hemos presentado en conferencias, como en esta, también tenemos un cartel, carteles que ganan premios y pueden encontrar incluso 2 resúmenes publicados sobre nuestro trabajo y trayectoria. Algo de lo que estamos bien orgullosos es el taller anual. Aquí es un evento de reclutar voluntarios nuevos y una intervención educativa también. Alrededor de 70, 80 personas de diferentes disciplinas vienen a nuestro taller. Hablamos de la historia de Recinto para Calle, del uso de sustancias y el trastorno por uso de sustancias, la historia de reducción de daños y su filosofía, cómo ser un buen voluntario a través del lenguaje y todo eso, y cómo usar el Narcan y cómo limpiar heridas en la calle. Buscamos qué hacía Estados Unidos y Canadá en sus currículos médicos sobre educación y reducción de daños, y Smith creó este esquema donde se dio cuenta que el 85% de los programas solamente hablaban sobre reducción de daños sin enseñar reducción de daños, que limita un montón cómo uno se acerca a la reducción de daños. Si yo solamente sé lo básico y no conozco el contexto histórico y la filosofía realmente detrás de la reducción de daños. Estoy bien orgulloso de que nuestro taller cubre todos estos temas. Ante una barrera increíble socioeconómica y política en Puerto Rico, la reducción de daños en Puerto Rico es bien poderosa. Hay muchas organizaciones trabajando lo que están aquí hoy. Y yo creo en el valor de la contribución de Recinto para la Calle en este poder. aunque siempre hay cosas que se pueden mejorar, como por ejemplo publicar más cosas en las redes, expandir las rutas, pero eventualmente vamos a tener intercambio de jeringuillas y duchas móviles gracias a una colaboración con Iniciativa Comunitaria, que es una de las más grandes en Puerto Rico. Y como última reflexión, yo comencé como voluntario en el 2018 cuando era estudiante subgraduado. Me convertí en líder en ese tiempo también y estoy bien feliz de que hayamos crecido juntos. Ahora yo les hablo a ustedes como un futuro residente de psiquiatría, y estoy listo para ser mentor y listo para pasar la antorcha a la futura generación de líderes de Recinto para Calle. Gracias un montón. Aquí está la referencia y chequen ese enlace. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Marcos. Yes, I was about to say, as I'm introducing the next speaker, there's plenty of seats over here for those standing in near the door if you don't wish to keep standing near the door, but feel free to keep standing near the door as well. Our next speaker is Pablo Gonzalez. He's an upcoming researcher at the University of Victoria in Western Canada. He's currently completing a Master of Science in the Social Dimensions of Health program and is a drug technician, harm reduction worker, support worker, researcher, and paramedic. Please welcome Pablo Gonzalez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pablo. I'm originally from Mexico City, but I live in Canada, in Victoria, BC. In Canada, especially where we are from in the West Coast, we like to do a land acknowledgement first. I sometimes do this after the title, but today I just switched it up and I wanted to do it first. I hope you all had a chance to hear Luz Mary in the plenary session, and I just wanted to echo her thoughts, how we are deeply embedded to indigenous people to be able to breathe this air and drink that clean water, So I hope you remember those indigenous people every time you take a drink of water. I usually wear a shirt that says, nice people take drugs, but my adopted Cree uncle, before I left, he gave me this shirt, and he told me, nephew, go represent our community, even though I'm a white boy from Mexico City. So here I am, I hope I look handsome enough. But I want to acknowledge those Muiscas people here in Bogotá, and I want to acknowledge the people that are over there where we do that work, the Lekwongan, the Songhees, the Esquimalt people, the Nushanot, the Kukwauakak, all those people. We're really indebted with them, Yesterday, an Uber driver was complaining to me about these protests. I don't know if you experienced traffic yesterday, but it's because the indigenous people were blocking the streets yesterday because it's Labor Day on Friday in Colombia. And he was complaining about them, And he was an artist at the same time. And I was like, you don't get it, right? Like, it's all connected. And I want to acknowledge that, all the people that have died because of the overdose crisis, indigenous people are overrepresented in those numbers, right? Even though they're like 5% of the people in Canada, they're like around 20 to 30% of the deaths, especially in British Columbia. So, thank you. Let's clicker. Right. Okay. Delay. Yeah, my name is Pablo. This project I collaborated with Dr. Bruce Wallace, sitting right there. Really thankful to him. Colin Kilty, who couldn't be here, but he helped me a lot with this project. Dennis Hoare, who is our chemistry lead in the project. And Dr. Jaime Arredondo, who is not here, but he's a good guy. We run a drug checking service in Victoria, BC, and in this project, which is my second half of my master's thesis, I looked at how drug dealers were accessing the service. I titled it Customer Service, Drug Sellers' Use of a Drug Checking Service Amidst the Overdose Crisis in BC, Canada. That's our window that we did for, I think it was like February 14th or something, and we wrote notes to community in hearts. I just ripped it off of Instagram, so. I'm gonna tell you a bit of the background of the study, the objective, the methods, the findings, the implications. Clearly trained as a scientist, I guess. These are some special samples that we detected or that came to our service in BC, in Victoria. That right there in the top in the middle is how down or fentanyl mostly looks in our region. It's mostly colored and mostly mixed caffeine, sugar, fentanyl or analogs, sometimes benzos. And there's a few other ones like that. Very interesting one, which is expected to be bromozolam, but it's a blotter with the printing of the tabs there. I thought that was interesting. So a lot of people have died because of the overdose crisis in BC and in Canada. Around 16,000 people in the province since the emergency was declared in 2016. Around 60,000 in the country. Last April 14th was the 9th anniversary of the declaration of the public emergency in the province. And so, as I said, the supply is dominated by fentanyl, sometimes fluorofentanyl, less so other analogs, and pretty much like around half of it has benzos. I don't like the word laced or tainted because a lot of people actually are looking for these ones, right? And all of these are preferences that might be communicated at the time of when you're purchasing drugs, right? It's a conversation that you might have with your dealer on like what you're looking for. Substance drug checking is a project that has been operating since 2018, and we have a service. It's free and anonymous, and it's located in the building of the drug user organization Solid of Victoria, which means that we're open Monday to Friday, noon to 7. And it's free and anonymous. Anyone can come. They get a 9-digit code that I'll show in a little bit. They don't have to give their phone number, their email, or anything. And yeah, I work like 2 or 3 days there, and I interact with a lot of people that are telling me explicitly that they're checking drugs to sell, and they're communicating a lot of their worries and a lot of their lack of knowledge of substances. So yeah, I really wanted to kind of look more on how we could help these people, because a lot of them are my friends that I've built relationships with, and how can these services that mainly come from academia, mainly come from people that are, sitting in their desks. At least substance was created as a research project first. So how can we bridge that better, right? That link between academia and communities. How can we, use those voices to design our interventions? So I wanted to analyze how drug sellers were accessing the service. And sellers and dealers are usually viewed as like these evil people that want to like kill other people and are flooding drugs into our communities, right? In the States, a lot of people get arrested because their clients die because of drugs that they sold them. So I wanted to challenge this view of like agents of harm, and I wanted to highlight the potential role of engaging sellers in these interventions, especially when we're looking at a so unstable supply that, as my friend Jeremy here said, we need to devise interventions that are higher up in the supply chain. This is actually a Dolph packaging there, and it has our 9-digit code there. So I'm not sure, but maybe some of this data that we used, I don't know, maybe some of this data that we used has some of that too. No further comments. So I used data from January 2021 to December 2024. This right there on the right is how data and samples are collected at Substance. So someone comes in, we create like a database record. We ask an intake survey. It's really short. We analyze the sample then using immunoassay test strips, fentanyl test strips, benzo test strips, paper spray mass spectrometry, which is a pretty expensive technology, but that it can detect up to like 0.04% of like trace level substances of what the machine is calibrated for. Currently it's like 100 substances. And then we use FTIR, which is infrared spectrometer, which can detect more of like the bulky substances. Anything that's under 5% we won't detect with FTIR, but it's good for identifying the cuts. And then we put all that together and it gets communicated to the service user. So I combined the results from the survey with the actual drug checking results. The survey includes a question that asks like, who is this drug check for? Some of people, they say self, friends, family, but then we have something that many other services don't have, which is to sell, right? And so these are self-identified sellers. And that's only possible because we've been there for many years and we have that rapport with participants. And it's clear that we're not associated with law enforcement whatsoever. The survey also includes like, what substance are you expecting it to be? Was it stronger than you expected? Any unexpected effects? Yeah, if it had been tried, and the motivations for using the service. I used a little bit of the other non-seller group just to make a little bit of comparison. So overall, in the 14 or almost 15,000 service users that we had in our data set that submitted almost 26,000 samples, 16% of them identified as sellers. They submitted 22% of all the samples, and sellers submitted more samples per visit, right? They submitted 2.4, a number of average samples compared to 1.7. And then 69% of these seller samples were illicit opioids, which is different to pharmaceutical opioids. Just means that it's not like pills like Oxy or whatever. It's just like fentanyl that's been mixed and it's like at the street level. These opioids submitted by sellers were 35% of the overall opioids. So you can see there's like a relationship between sellers submitting opioids and sellers submitting like a variety of samples. Sellers were also found to have tried those substances more often than other people, which maybe suggests that drug checking might be like a second layer of control, I guess, like quality control. Because I always like to say that the first drug checking technology was our bodies, right? And that just keeps being a thing, It's for someone that actually knows their body, it's a good technology. They're also more confident about the potency of their samples. More of them reported them as expected, but then we found more unexpected or additional substances in their samples, which means that they have information, but that information might not be super accurate or might just not be what they think. And that highlights to me the value of integrating drug checking for their needs much more. And they also submitted more cut samples. A lot of them, they come with 3 samples that are from a batch that they mixed, and they just take pieces from the batch from different places that might look different or something, and they want to see if there's a differences in potency, different in components. A lot of these samples, they have more than 1 or 2 or 3 components, right? They might have multiple fentanyl analogs. Yeah. And so just to wrap it up, well, that's blurry. Yeah, I just want to, a lot of what I think that harm reduction is this thing where we get to demonize the demonized and rehumanize the dehumanized. And drug sellers are, one of those key populations for me. And I think they're really valuable when we're devising interventions, right? The war on drugs, they try to put things so that we don't have knowledge, so that people who use drugs have more diseases, that they die more, and they try to exclude those people. And I think this could be a way of bringing that knowledge back, giving it back to the community. So I think they're very valuable public health stakeholders, and I do think that drug checking has like supply chain interventions, like hardcore. Sometimes we've been seeing the prices change because we changed like a note or something like that in drug checking, which is an interesting thing. But I think that if we can actually intentionally adapt this intervention to their needs, it could have like major repercussions. But a lot of people are scared, right? We're one of the only services that actually has that question of like to sell. so it just makes it not super talked about. I think drug dealers protect their community. I think that's like my feedback loop. It's really blurry. Sorry about that. But I think, there's knowledge with people who sell drugs. They might have their drugs checked, and that might cause like adjusted supply decisions, which might impact consumers. And then consumers are also talking to the people who sell drugs, right? You don't just go to a booth or whatever and sometimes you do, but normally there's conversations. Normally drug sellers are people who use drugs, are people that are part of the community. It's not just like, ooh, drug sellers over there, It's like actual human beings. So, thank you.
Thanks, Pablo. Our next speaker is Jordan Wulz. Jordan is an associate professor of pharmacy practice at Concordia University, Wisconsin, School of Pharmacy in the Milwaukee area, obviously of the United States. His teaching and research efforts are focused on pain management, substance use disorder, and harm reduction. Please welcome Jordan.
Hi. Well, welcome to the final day of HR25. I know for me, this conference has been life-changing and inspiring beyond measure, and I just hope it's been the same for you. So, my name is Jordan Wulz, and I'm a harm reductionist, pharmacist, and professor. I'm here today to tell you about a 3-minute thesis event that was put on by my local brewery in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA. And I want to tell you about how a fun, beer-filled event can be a platform for advocating for harm reduction in your local community. So as part of this presentation, I'll be discussing 2 theses that I presented on. The first, the case for safe consumption sites, and the second, the case for legalizing drugs. So how many of you have heard of a 3-minute thesis before? Raise your hand. Okay, good. Well, if you haven't heard of it, in academia, the 3-minute thesis is a strategy to help junior researchers develop and build upon their science communication skills with the lay public. So typically, a 3-minute thesis allows graduate students to present their scientifically complex research to an audience that knows nothing about that research. In the brewery setting, it's a similar idea, but according to my local brewery, with more fun and less maths. So, and when they told me that I have 12 minutes for this presentation, I was like, oh, fucking golden. That's 4 times as much as I need. So the idea is simple. My brewery asked for 10 volunteers to submit their 3 MTs on PowerPoint slides before the event. Each person gets 3 minutes to present on their topic, and then 1 to 2 minutes for question and answer with the audience. And each speaker gets free beer all night, so you kind of hope that you're not the last one to go, although those are usually the funniest. And then, yeah, at the end of the event, the audience votes on the top 3 presentations. So you may be wondering, what were some of these scientifically complex topics that other people presented on? Well, in Wisconsin, we're a fairly sophisticated people, so naturally we had a number of really intellectually stimulating topics like why you are showering too much and my mouse bite journey. My personal favorite was why ska and pro wrestling are the only legitimate forms of art, which was controversial enough to inevitably lead to a brewery-wide mosh pit and a couple of choke slams and pile drivers. Which leads me to my 2 topics. And I'll be honest, this is my first time doing this in the brewery setting, so I didn't know what the hell to expect. So my topics were a little bit more serious and meaningful, especially when compared to whether or not mayo is superior to butter in crafting a hot sandwich. So, if it's okay with everyone, what I would like to do is give a live encore of one of these 3-minute theses. Yeah? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna start from the beginning. I'm gonna act like we are in the brewery right now, so cheers, salute. All right. Well, hey everyone, my name is Jordan Wulz, and I have the pleasure of talking about harm reduction and why we should embrace more controversial strategies, such as safe consumption sites, to help reduce the risks of drug use. Harm reduction is a set of practical strategies that help to reduce the negative consequences of risky behavior. And the reality is that we incorporate harm reduction into a variety of socially acceptable but also risky activities. So for example, how many of you drove here today? Probably none of you. But driving is very risky. At its peak in 1972 in the US, 55,000 people died from a car accident. So what did we do? We started requiring people to click it or ticket, wear a seatbelt. So now I know it's 12 p.m., 11:30, but how many of you drink alcohol today? All right, there we go, salute. But even drinking alcohol can be risky, especially during the US Prohibition when everyone and their mom were making bathtub gin. So we decided to regulate alcohol and make it safer to drink. How many of you have had sex today? Oh, yeah, there we go. Here we go. Yeah, that one worked a little bit better at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. But what's our harm reduction tool for sex? Condoms, exactly. But yet, harm reduction seems to be much more controversial when we try to apply it to illicit drug use. So harm reduction strategies for drug use really span the spectrum of social acceptance. One of the first strategies championed in the US were needle exchanges or syringe access programs. And the idea here is to reduce the reuse or sharing of needles, which is a documented way to prevent the spread of infectious diseases such as hepatitis C and HIV. We've also increased the accessibility of naloxone or Narcan to ensure people can have it on hand to reverse opioid overdoses. But you may also remember a time when even these two strategies were controversial. And the reality remains that despite the expansion of these strategies, opioid overdose deaths continue to rise, primarily because drug users, more often than not, don't actually know what they're using. So on the left, this is a sample of a drug that was supposed to be ecstasy. It was tested by a lab, thank you Dana Larson, and came back as 70 to 75% fentanyl, an ultra-potent opioid blamed for much of our current opioid crisis. And as a response to the opioid crisis, a group in Canada called DULF has taken it upon themselves to buy illicit drugs from the black market, test them for purity, package them, and then distribute these drugs to their users, an act that has significantly reduced the risk of overdose and death in their community. So, as I stand here today in this brewery, drinking a tested, regulated, 4.7% ABV Club Colombia beer with bartenders who can call me a cab, maybe even an ambulance. I can't help but wonder, what makes a bar or a brewery that much different than an overdose prevention center where drug users can go to get their drugs tested, be provided with sterile syringes and needles, and use their drugs under the supervision of staff who have naloxone on hand in case of an overdose. Thank you, Guy Felicella. But ultimately, the question I want to ask each of you here tonight is, where would you want your loved one to use drugs, especially if they're struggling with addiction? Would you want them to use in a cold, dark alley, alone with trash and used needles strewn about, where they don't even know what they're injecting? Or would you want them to have the ability to use in a clean and safe environment with bystanders nearby who can reverse an overdose if one were to occur? Another way to ask the question is, do people deserve a second, third, or fourth chance at life? So as we all leave here tonight, in the spirit of harm reduction, I encourage us to all wear a seatbelt, use condoms, and carry naloxone. The end. And I also want to thank Peter Krykant for this image. I stole all these images off of Twitter, so thank you guys for using Twitter. Yeah, so that is a 3-minute thesis in person. So now I want to ask, do you guys want to see a video of my other one, the case for legalizing drugs? So this is actually what happened, so. That was my wife. think you got to exit out of the slideshow.
What if I were to tell you the reason people are dying from drug overdose isn't the drugs, but rather the laws that restrict their use? Historically, America has equated morality with legality. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not drink alcohol. Thou shalt not vote if you're female or black. See, the reality is that it doesn't really work that way, right? So when we think about our country, we are often called a social experiment. We change laws all the time to meet the current moment that we're in. And considering that we have over 100,000 drug overdose deaths each year, I think it's high time we rethink our drug policy. We've been waging a war on drugs for over 50 years, but what do we have to show for it? Each year, the U.S. arrests over 1 million people for drug possession. And in fact, of our 1.9 million people who are currently incarcerated in the U.S., 20% are there for drug charges alone. But it's not just incarceration. One of the primary reasons that people are dying is because the illicit drug supply continues to become more potent and more toxic. Now, is that the drug's fault, or is it an unintended consequence of our laws? So you want to get drugs across the border? Hey, let's make an ultra-potent synthetic opioid like fentanyl that we can carry over the border in minuscule amounts. Fentanyl's the issue? Let's ban fentanyl. What's that quote about history repeating itself again? Banning fentanyl importation only leads to even more potent fentanyl analogs and other harmful drugs in our illicit drug supply. And ultimately, has any of these things actually stopped people from using drugs? If it has, the only reason is because they've died from this increasingly toxic drug supply. So let's take a look at a case study from Ohio, and I know I only got 3 minutes, so just look at the dang graph here, right? Big heroin, little heroin. Little fentanyl, big fentanyl. Oh, and by the way, if you're trying to buy Coke in Ohio, there's a 19% chance that your cocaine is actually fentanyl. So that's fun. So what do? We came up with some clever ways to try and reduce the harm for people that are engaging with an inherently harmful and unregulated drug supply. We give people unused needles so that we can stop the spread of HIV and hepatitis C. We make sure that everyone has access to the opioid overdose reversal agent naloxone. We tell drug users, test your drugs with these little plastic strips. And we've even opened overdose prevention centers where people can go to test and use their drugs in a clean space where staff are nearby with naloxone on hand. All of these things, important stopgap measures for the current legislative environment that we live in today. But instead of piecemealing all these things together, what if we could just create a safe supply of the most commonly used drugs through legalization and regulation? Crazy, right? We've never tried to regulate a risky substance before. Pretty good. We should open a brewery, right? But don't get me wrong. I want people to be free from the chokehold of drugs. I want them to seek treatment when they're ready. I want them to find secure housing, to re-enter the workforce, to rekindle relationships with family and friends. But how can they do so if they can't get a job because of their criminal record? And how can they find housing if they don't have an income? And at the heart of the matter, how can they do anything without a pulse?
Thank you guys. Appreciate you watching that. I have like 0 time left, so I'm going to try and wrap this up real quick. But what did I learn from this experience? I realized that people in the US genuinely want to learn about alternatives to the war on drugs. But would they come and listen to me talk about harm reduction at 10 a.m. in a library with 0 beer? I'm not so sure. Sometimes we can fall into the trap of preaching to the choir when we're educating on harm reduction strategies. But if we really want to expand our circle and welcome people into the harm reduction community, it's better to meet them where they are. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Okay, let's move right along. Okay, next speaker is Elisabeth Avril. Elisabeth is is general practitioner and executive manager of Gaia Paris Association, whose mission is developing harm reduction among people who use drugs. As a clinician, she's involved in the HIV and HVC treatment of people who use drugs and substitution therapy. Please welcome Elisabeth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the conference and Colombia, because we are all together here and it's fine. So I present how we fought the NIMBY syndrome in Paris with my colleague and other. I will explain how we try and we fought and we are still fighting. And here you can see the entrance of the DCR in Paris. So our organization, Gaia, is particularly known for launching the first only drug consumption room in Paris since 2016. And it's the only one in Paris and suburbs, and we have 12 million inhabitants. So it's not enough, it is not reaching the demand. Especially we have a lot of people who use crack, around 7,000 people homeless or semi-homeless people, and they don't know where to go, and we can't reach this demand. And this other French DCR is in Strasbourg, in the northeast of France. And this drug scene, Gaia Outreach Team and Mobile Unit, since 1989, we have witnessed the emergence of growing open drug scenes in Paris, and especially with consumption of crack. I show you this very stigmatizing example of NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard syndrome. Very horrible picture. You can see Paris, world capital of crack. This is, and under it, they are coming to your home. And this is a leaflet distributed by a resident after police placed a big drug crack scene in a garden surrounded by residential blocks. And it becomes very problematic. So the town hall decided to close the gates of the garden only for the drug users. And so they were just on the pavement in a very, very stigmatizing way. And people were, taking pictures and, saying that they shouldn't be there. And on the next slide, you can see this drug scene in front of the gate of the garden. And on the back, you can see a demonstration of residents in the garden to protest against the presence of people who use drugs, while in the meantime, they are refusing opening new DCR. So the situation is completely blocked. Even if the 2023 Europe surveys, a national survey on representation, opinions, and perception of psychotropic drugs, that survey showed that 83% of French people agree with the principle of drug consumption room, and 55% would accept one in their neighborhood. However, all new project triggers strong opposition from some residents, and the latest DCR project in Marseille, in south of France, was stopped due to lack of political support first, and also opposition from a group of residents. And setup of services for people who use drugs in cities is a very controversial topic in France, and concerning DCR, the controversy is even worse. Consequently, a lot of residents is fighting quite aggressively against the presence of people who use drugs. and strongly oppose any potential creation of new services, including much needed additional DCR in the region and in the national territory. And as an example, this week in Paris, authorities temporarily closed dropping due to violence by local residents. And this, at a political level, within the current government, the Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Justice have openly taken a position against harm reduction and against DCR on several occasions. The drawing is a poster of the General Assembly of People Who Use Drug, organized by ASUD, a French drug user organization. And in this poster, you can see Mr. Darmanin. He was the Minister of Interior, now he's Minister of Justice. And at that time, we were talking about hidden discrimination, and excuse me, and now it's not hidden, it's spoke, really, and our new Minister of Interior, Monsieur Rotaillot, said that people who buy drugs have blood on his hands. So it's really a big discrimination. And so we have to find allies, and we benefit, our DCR benefits since 2016 from multiple level governance. We have a lot of committees, Paris Steering Committee, Neighborhood Committee, Monitoring Committee, and following our mediation action before the implementation, Gaia, we continue to inform and raise awareness among the stakeholders in our environment. And unlike, for example, unlike the Ministry of Interior, the District Chief Police Commissioner is an ally. He systematically defends the DCR during the Neighborhood Committee by providing stable or decreasing delinquency figures since the beginning of the experimentation, so it's a really good help. And also we have daily morning and afternoon outreach work to reach out to people who use drugs who do not use the DCR, but also to residents and shopkeepers in the area. And we organize also visits of the premise for any who may be concerned. And these visits are really important. They allow us to bring awareness on the reality of the DCR and explain which type of social or medical support we can offer to people who use drugs. And we have also a hotline dedicated to the neighbors, and it also allows them to report problems related to drug use in the neighborhood. And Gaia staff often intervene in public or semi-public spaces to reduce so-called nuisance linked to injection or behavioral problem of certain users. And we also have a big work on outreach involved in stations and on the underground, and Railways funds a year-round position for this work, and official representative of the railway station are strong defenders of the DCR now, and Gaia is part of institutional or associative meeting and develop awareness session on regular basis for police and railway agents. So now we have an important thread will be at the end of the year, of this year, because it's the end of the experimental period for DCR, and knowing that some politicians want to shut it down, this experimental statute decided for 6 years was renewed for 3 years in 2022, despite very good evaluation by certified state bodies. And the 3 main studies demonstrate the usefulness of DCR in terms of health, public safety, as well as its cost effectiveness. And despite this, the device is in danger of being closed. And now we are waiting for the final assessment of the 2 French DCR, which must be sent to the Parliament in a few weeks so that they can decide of our future. So, all this communication, awareness-raising work, a lot of hours, has enabled the creation of a collective named Collective La Traverse. In French, it's sort of the crossing in English, in 2025, and the collective wants to act for the sustainability of the DCR and also for the people who use drug rights. This collective brings together resident, neighbor, association, people who use drug, harm reduction service representative and professional of the DCR. And they organized a launch party in the DCR last December, and the mayor and her deputies, journalists and residents outside the collective, including opponents, were invited. And it was a very good party. You can see some people who use drugs from the DCR and some politics together talking. That is not really frequent in France. So concern in the forefront, the people who use drugs are mobilizing and increasingly wish to participate in discussion, because it's always, people are talking about them, saying what they have to do, and I think it's really important that they can really speak out what they have to say, and especially regarding the future of the DCR, they elected a representative and decide to join with the resident and supporting the DCR to make their voice heard. To do so, they wrote an open letter, sort of manifesto, explaining what the DCR brings to them and why they needed it. They read it during the evening in front of politicians, journalists, and residents. It was really emotional that they could do that, because in this DCR we have really a lot of people homeless, and it's really sometimes difficult to organize and to come. And resident part of the collective have also written a manifesto, and they give interview to support the DCR and the people's rights. They advocate to show that their life in the neighborhood is not a nightmare, and that Paris and suburb needs other DCR. For conclusion, recently the NGO Médecins du Monde, Doctors of the World, filed a legal appeal against the state for inaction with regard to DCR. There was a lot of media coverage for us, and people who use drugs that you see on these press clippings were able to speak out and were interviewed a lot of times. We were able to speak to all national media, and today our fight continues with parliamentarians to convince them to vote in favor of harm reduction and DCR in France, and we have now strong allies among residents. We have not only people against us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Beatrix. Oh, Elisabeth, sorry. Our next speaker is Beatrix. Beatrix Vass is an international drug policy specialist and advocate focused on health, human rights and youth issues. She has advised legislators in over 20 countries on decriminalisation, harm reduction and regulation. She's active in youth organising as a member of Youth Rise and the Paradigm Coalition, and serves on the board of the Vienna and New York NGO committees on drugs. Please welcome Beatrix.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to begin by saying how much of a privilege it has been to be here all week and learn from all of you and connect with all the new allies. And I also couldn't help but reflect on how much we have managed to change and how much we have managed to win. But also, I was reminded that even in that context of so much change that we've achieved in terms of legislation and political wins, some of our successes have come slower, smaller, and unfortunately more fragile than we have hoped. And the backlash and the pushback has been so fast, so coordinated, and so well funded. And against that kind of dark picture, I would like to offer something groundbreaking, which is that we need politicians to be our allies. And I started in the drug policy reform and harm reduction movement from community organizing, as has been mentioned. But for the last couple of years, I've held positions in different advocacy coalitions and networks working kind of from the inside with politicians and decision makers, which a lot of the times felt like infiltrating another word, but I feel like I've learned a lot from that, and the most fundamental thing has been that sustained change in terms of policies and perceptions and public opinions is impossible without strong civil society support backing that up. Policies, budgets, none of that sticks without the people who are pushing, organizing, and showing up behind it. And so we need civil society and community to thrive and exist in solidarity. But we do need politicians to also recognize that and then support us in that. And just recalling Ambassador Laura Hill from the plenary yesterday as well, who said that a government is never wrong when it engages sincerely and constructively with civil society. I want to build a little bit on that and what it means to be in trust-based partnerships with politicians. So in my work with elected officials, members of parliament, but also other political leaders, we've mainly organized peer-to-peer exchanges where politicians could share their experiences, but also different capacity building activities where politicians could learn from experts and civil society. And that's very clearly how much technical expertise and expertise from lived experience communities can bring. But also for me, especially coming from community, what was very interesting is some of the first times of staying alone in a room with politicians and hearing how that conversation evolves. And some of the points raised were like by the politicians is that civil society, NGOs, they only come to me when they want something. And as a civil society advocate, that feels unfair, but it has also offered up another side to me, is that in the same way that I came to the international community to connect, politicians also want relationships. So in that way, politicians are not our enemy. I'm not saying they're our solution. Our community has been also figuring out solutions for ourselves, but politicians can be real, valuable allies if we can build these relationships with intention. And I believe that what truly allied politicians can do for our movement is they can bring their peers along. The conversation shifts when they're talking peer-to-peer, when an elected official hears from another elected official that you can advocate for the right thing and you can keep your political office. And it also helps them see that this change is possible to do. What we've seen in this work as well is that political interest is real. Politicians are recognizing that the war on drugs has failed. They are looking for new solutions, but also many of the politicians who recognize this feel isolated, feel alone, do not necessarily know how to connect with others. And I think this is also where our international movement comes in. Sorry, my voice has been struggling. Because we have built these connections amongst ourselves and civil society locally in our countries. We also have good established relationships with our elected officials or decision makers. And we also see what we are doing on the ground. We see these relevant examples. So there's an opportunity in connecting these different leaders, and connecting them into our movement, connecting them to what already exists, because also as civil society, we already have the research, we have the narratives, we have our moral clarity, we have the courage that politicians who want to implement change are looking for. So we don't need to reinvent this, but we need to build bridges across all of this. By helping politicians find each other, we can enhance that. Bringing them into our community also sustains that political power and political momentum. So it's not just being in the same room, but also really thinking together, and then going back to also Kate's opening statements, reimagining kind of what it looks like and how we can lead in different ways. And in a lot of ways, like collaborating across borders and knowing from each other. This is what we have been doing, so it's not if controversial that on a political level, countries should also be learning from each other, and different policy models are adaptable and relevant across borders. There's a lot that we can do in sharing that with each other, and there's a lot that our politicians can do in supporting us in that. So also just as a final thought, and then we're going to have time for discussions as well. I've also been reflecting a lot, and we've heard throughout this week, or rightful concerns about the far right and radicals taking up even more space. And I think it's also just a reminder that it is also our current and previous governments who are responsible for the drug policies currently in place. So we need to hold them continuously accountable, and while Resisting Together has this particular urgency, this work is always relevant. And when we can build these relationships of trust with politicians and bring them along, bring them in community, we can, this is much more about drug policy. It's also about how our democracies and societies function. Thank you, and sorry about my voice.
Thank you, Beatrix. You're supposed to try and get your session in on Monday and then have your late nights at conferences, not have your session on the last day and have your very late nights beforehand. So I hope. Okay, time for questions, and remember this is being live streamed as well, so people on the live stream, we are going to get your questions as well, and I've got a little WhatsApp to continue to watch to get your questions in. We might have a mic runner, Ben. Yeah, please. So, are there any questions for our fabulous panellists on any of those wonderful issues that we heard about? And I've just talked about the WhatsApp channel, so I should also check it. Now, anybody? I think I'll start with a question to Elisabeth about the drug consumption rooms. Because I was concerned when you were talking about that in terms of the levels and numbers of drug consumption rooms, and that they've been around for 6 years. You said they're extended for another 3. Is that like all drug consumption rooms in France, or is it within Paris? We're facing the prospect of all drug consumption rooms closing if there's not political support for it?
It's in France, you have 2 DCR only, one in Paris, one in Strasbourg, and we have the same status. So we have an experimental status for 6 years, and in 2022, they should have say, okay, let's go, you can go on and give us. No, they prefer, because they fight among the government, they've decided to put 3 more years of experimentation just to have time, time for what, we don't know. And now it's the end of this year, and they have to decide in June. And if they do nothing, no law, nothing, we have to close, the 2 only. And we have some colleagues in France, they have one of them presented yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago. They did some small space for injection and smoking, but it's illegal. They don't have authorization, so they don't have fundings. They just do, 1, 2 booths, one. So we need more. We need more different small spaces, big spaces. It depends of the town. It depends on the scene. It depends of everything. So we have to adapt to the context. But now we are quite anxious, in fact.
Thank you. Yes, great. A question down there.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. I have a question for Pablo. In terms of your work on the research side and the service delivery side, I was wondering if you could speak about any barriers that you might have had potentially with increased police presence in your services or accessing kind of funding for your work, like noting that it's focused on drug suppliers, and any kind of learnings from that we might be able to take from you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you know, but elections in Canada were just now. And the Liberals won. I don't know if that's good or bad anymore. But yeah, it's been like for over a year, it's been a very uncertain environment. We had, I think it was like a year ago, there was like a whole media attack on like harm reduction and especially like drug checking. And one of those points was like, oh wait, you're testing illegal drugs? Wait, you're testing drugs for people who sell drugs? And it was like a surprise, right? Even though that's the entire point of the intervention, it's like testing illegal drugs. So it's been an uncertain environment, and also for funding. I think the Liberal winning gives us a little bit more hope, but it's still uncertain. A lot of services have closed or reduced. A lot of my colleagues in other services have been laid off. In terms of police presence, we are in an extremely privileged environment in Canada, just coming from Mexico City, where, drug trafficking and police are kind of explicitly the same. And the only people that, the people that get most harmed are people who use drugs at the consumer level. So in Canada, yeah, we have a specific exemption to Bill C-36, I think, that pretty much allows us to handle substances and for people to be protected while they're in the space. But then, so maybe we haven't seen a police presence increased around those services. But we also, they also rolled out the decriminalization of small amounts of substances in BC in 2023, and that's kind of shaken the interactions with police and people who use drugs at the street level, because police have lost a little bit of their power that they really wanted, ways to arrest people, ways to investigate. It's been shaken up. A lot of people that are living in the streets are being moved and kicked out to other places. And it's pretty dire, and it's definitely caused an increase in overdoses. And not only in Victoria, but also in other parts of Canada. Alberta, I've heard, Ontario. So it's a dire situation. It's a village.
Quick question for Jordan. For the 3-minute thesis, I did one when I was going through my graduate program. Very nerve-wracking. Probably would have been more fun in a bar. And I was talking about public intoxication, which made it probably even better. Question, how were you part of like the planning process? Did you just find out about it, get involved? Question being, how do they select people? Because I know when they do the 3-minute a lot of prep. Like really prepared, make sure it's legit. Your topic can be anything, But how do they pick people? And is it like random folks from the community and someone's an accountant and they do a 3-minute on their, like, why their job's important? Just curious.
Yeah, great question. So basically the brewery owner said, email me, I'm ready to get involved. And so honestly, a message to see if anyone wants to do it. And he's presenting, but that's about it. And on my own horse, go production. And then that second one didn't look like the same brewery is because that an event where all of the first place winners together and had them do a different or a slightly different topic. So yeah, it's very unscientific in terms of how they get volunteers to do it, and certainly the topics are very widespread. But usually, for me, usually.
I think all of your presentations, this seems to me that harm is being in the back in the rest of the United States. I think that is when individuals see public drug use or they see homeless encampments, they might feel unsafe, but they aren't necessarily unsafe, right? So it's perception versus reality. I'm curious, in your work with groups who are not familiar with harm reduction, how do you reverse that perception versus reality? And I guess my second question that's related is, how do you do it in a way that doesn't monopolize the trauma and the grief of harm reductionists and people who use drugs?
Elisabeth, maybe start with you with that one.
How do we convince people far from the field when we go? Well, in our with that security and he can talk and say, well, in this district it helped a lot, but you know, when people
Hey, would you like her to in a house somewhere safe, and yeah, just appealing to feelings and emotion, which is a very strong promoter of change, because it anyway, not like my brother to die. Different actions that be vented with safe kids, and so yeah, just appealing to emotion to anyone you talk.
Sorry, I'll make it quick. Thank you so much for this presentation and all the work that you do. Actually, this is kind of a follow-up to the previous question. I'm from the United States, and I find that it used to be a lot easier to talk to people about harm reduction because we could just agree that, like, we don't want people to die. Like, that would be, like, where we start, and maybe how we go about that is different, but we can agree on that. And I'm finding that recently, maybe exacerbated by our new administration in the United States, we can't even agree at that point. So I'm finding this, even talking about it and playing on emotions is not working as well, where we just can't even agree that people should not die. And I'm wondering to anybody in this room, really, if you are facing that, if you have faced that in your work, and what to do. Thanks.
Who wants to tackle that one?
Yeah, I'll say I don't think I've personally experienced that yet. I forget who wrote it, but Wisconsin is like little Germany. We love to drink. So we always come back to alcohol, and there was a tweet that I saw that said, what if you went to the corner store and tried to get a beer and it actually had wine in it? Or what if you tried to get wine and it had bleach in it? And I think those are things that, like, in Wisconsin, where the people that I know, that does matter to them, and I think they'd understand that a little clearer. So not to just repeat what others have been saying, but I think that's what I would say.
I think one argument when I talk to them is also to show that these people, I think it's better that people who use drugs talk themselves. And it works, because when we go in a neighborhood committee, sometimes some people come with us. They don't, it's difficult for them, you know, to be exposed like that and to come and talk about their life. But when they come, it calms, you know, the assistant. You know, they don't have the same words. They are not so much like, you can die, you know, they are in front of the person, so it's more difficult. And when I talk and say, you know, a big third of people who we are welcoming are coming from foster care, that touches them, because it's a society. The society is concerned. Everyone is concerned. You know, these people are not like coming from somewhere else, or, you know, and generally they say, it's your people. I say, no, I'm not their mother. You know, I know them, I love them, but you know, it's our society who produce people in the foster care, and after they are alone in the street and they have all these problems. So this is a good argument. So we have to think of all these arguments. And also one problem we have, we don't have so much fundings for communication, and these people are very active on social media, and we should respond, but not like, you know, if you start to respond, you must be there everywhere, every day, and respond, because they are every day. And if they take a photo of a syringe, it's 100 syringes. And if they take someone with, you know, in the street, like injecting, they will turn this picture all the time. So I'm thinking at this time how I can find fundings to have people to answer in the social media, but really to give the basic and you know, the good argument. But we need people to do that. We need money to pay them, and all. So we have to think.
Okay, this is the last question.
My very last,
Marianne.
I'll be super quick. Marianne from Australia. I just would like to leave a thought and a question in people's minds. There's a piece of work that was done in Australia looking at how we change the narrative, and I suppose it's a point about this perception of safety. And what it did was interview a whole bunch of people and look at the frames and the impacts of certain types of language. And one of the key messages that came out of it is that perhaps we in harm reduction are not doing ourselves any favours when we continue to repeat a negative. And by that I mean when we continue to say things like, use phrases like the war on drugs, use phrases like, you know, drug users are not necessarily violent, drug users shouldn't be criminalised. All we are doing is repeating the words of war and violence and criminality and threat, and that what that is inadvertently doing is reaffirming in other people's minds that there is a link between the two. And so it invited us to think of new ways of talking about well-being, about the type of community that we want to live in, about where we want to, people that need help get it, where we support rather than punish, and really learning to reframe our language so that we're not inadvertently reinforcing a negative. I find it very hard to do, but it's an interesting thought.
Thank you, Marianne. And with that, I think we are officially over time, and that is a lovely place to end. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this session. Thank you to our wonderful speakers.